Donald Trump is again alleging voter fraud in the 2020 U.S. presidential elections. Meanwhile, his Democratic rival Joe Biden has taken the lead in Georgia with 99% of votes counted. In the meantime, U.S. media say the Secret Service is sending reinforcement to protect Joe Biden in Delaware today as more votes are counted in key states. In local news, High Commissioner of Canada to Jamaica, Laurie Peters, says gender-based violence against women and children has increased in the country, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. In regional news, Dr. Ralph Gonzalez has been elected Prime Minister for St. Vincent and the Grenadines for a record fifth term. And in international news, at least 50 people have been killed by landslides in Guatemala after Storm Eta's torrential rain and high winds battered the Central American country. In the sports report, Waterhouse's CONCACAF League run ends at the round of 16 with a 3-1 loss to Haitian champions Arca High. And in business this morning, the St. Lucia government has announced a relaxation of the newly implemented protocols to control the borders and prevent people illegally entering the country. The details coming up next. U.S. President Donald Trump is again alleging voter fraud in the 2020 U.S. presidential elections. In a media briefing last evening, Mr. Trump said illegal votes were being used to try and steal the election from Republicans. He claimed to have proof but did not provide any evidence to substantiate the irregularities being alleged. The U.S. president is also alleging election interference on the part of entities he's describing as big media and big money. Mr. Trump says the election results may end up in the U.S. Supreme Court. More in this report from Stephen Simmons.
President Trump is standing by his allegation that the Democrats are using fraudulent ballots to win the remaining battleground states that will decide the presidential election. Mr. Trump says he has evidence that the election results might be brought before the highest court in the U.S.
If you count the legal votes, I easily win. If you count the illegal votes, they can try to steal the election from us. If you count the votes that came in late, we're looking at them very strongly, but a lot of votes came in late. I've already decisively won many critical states, including massive victories in Florida, Iowa, Indiana, Ohio. We won these and many other victories despite historic election interference from big media, big money. And we think we will win because we have so much evidence, so much proof, and it's going to end up perhaps at the highest court in the land.
President Trump says he's outperformed his Democratic challenger Joe Biden in states where the polls predicted that there would have been a blue wave. He says the polls are fake.
And the pollsters got it knowingly wrong. They got it knowingly wrong. We had polls that were so ridiculous, and everybody knew it at the time. There was no blue wave that they predicted. They thought there was going to be a big blue wave. That was false. It was done for suppression reasons. But instead, there was a big red wave. And it's been properly acknowledged, actually, by the media. They were, I think, very impressed. But that was after the fact. That doesn't do us any good.
Meanwhile, President Trump says he's confident that he'll win a second term. He says his goal is to defend the integrity of the presidential election.
And that got whittled down. In every case, they got whittled down. Today, we're on track to win Arizona. We only need to carry, I guess, 55% of the remaining vote, 55% margins, and that's a margin that we've significantly exceeded. So we'll see what happens with that, but we're on track to do okay in Arizona. Our goal is to defend the integrity of the election. We'll not allow the corruption to steal such an important election, or any election for that matter. And we can't allow anybody to silence our voters.
Stephen Simmons for Nationwide News.
And Biden has taken the lead in Georgia with 99% of votes counted. If Biden takes Georgia, Trump cannot achieve the required 270 electoral college votes to secure the presidency. Mr. Biden has a slender lead in Nevada and Arizona and is chipping away at Trump's advantage in Pennsylvania. Mr. Biden has appealed for calm as the nail-biting count drags on. The Democrat now has 253 electoral college college votes, while Republican Mr. Trump has 214. To win the White House, a candidate needs 270. In the meantime, U.S. media say the Secret Service is sending reinforcement to protect Joe Biden in Delaware today as more votes are counted in key states. Joe Biden has taken the lead in Georgia over Trump. Trump's chances of re-election hinges on the developments in Georgia and Pennsylvania. Trump cannot afford to lose Georgia's 16 electoral votes. Here's more in this report from ABC.
Welcome back. The Washington Post reports the Secret Service will send reinforcements to Delaware today to help protect former Vice President Joe Biden as more votes are counted in those key battleground states.
Let's take a look at what else we can expect today. ABC's Faith Abube joins us now. Faith, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Kenneth and Mona. In just a matter of hours, we could learn who will be the next president of the United States. The majority of the votes in Pennsylvania are expected to be counted today, and Trump's lead in that state has been shrinking. If Biden wins Pennsylvania, he'll reach the 270 electoral votes he needs there. Meanwhile, a hopeful sign for the president in Arizona. Biden's lead has been slimming in that state as the counting continues. More results were expected out of Maricopa County at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. And in Georgia, a major development overnight, Joe Biden taking the lead and is now ahead with fewer than 18,000 ballots left to count. The results from thousands of ballots were expected to be released from Gwinnett County today, and those are in the Atlanta suburbs. But the bottom line here is all eyes are on Pennsylvania today because Trump cannot be reelected without it. Kenneth, Mona.
All right, Faith, thank you.
That report from ABC. Back in local news, High Commissioner of Canada to Jamaica, Laurie Peters, says gender-based violence against women and children has increased in the country, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. During a multimedia launch of an initiative addressing gender violence yesterday, High Commissioner Peters noted that women feel obligated to settle for abuse to maintain stable family relationships. However, she's urging women to change that narrative because abuse in any form is unacceptable.
Social norms play a large part in the continuation of gender-based violence. Counselors have often found that there's a strong culture of reconciliation, of promoting family stability over the actual abusive situation of women and children. Women are encouraged to, quote, make up or return home for the sake of the children and the family. And unfortunately, harmful social norms such as that often negate national efforts to reduce gender-based violence.
High Commissioner Peters highlighted that entities established to combat gender violence are calling on the public not to normalize or praise deviant behavior. She says gender stakeholders are campaigning for more positive social norms in Jamaica.
Changing these social norms is one of the most difficult aspects of reducing gender-based violence. Uncovering and dismantling harmful norms that explicitly or implicitly sanction violence against women and children, this needs to be seriously addressed if we hope to engender significant change. Any response to the pandemic cannot be sufficiently effective if abuse to women and children is not factored in an integrated way in all response strategies.
Laurie Peters, High Commissioner of Canada to Jamaica. Meanwhile, Executive Director of Jamaicans for Justice, JFJ, Roger Malcolm, says that the incidence of gender-based violence in Jamaica is at epidemic levels.
But let's think about what that means. You pass 4 women on their way to work or going to get something to eat or in society. That means that one of those 4 women is more than likely a victim and hopefully a survivor of physical or sexual violence. That's an astounding statistic. If you pass groups of 4 persons, one of those persons is a victim of something that should never occur. And so a statistic like that, really, when you think of the groups of persons that you pass, is at epidemic levels. If I were to tell you that 1 in 4 persons has a communicable disease, you wouldn't leave your house.
Roger Malcolm, Executive Director of Jamaicans for Justice, JFJ. Health and Wellness Minister Dr. Christopher Tufton says there's been one COVID-19 related death among residents in the Kingston.
To date, we have had 17 cases that have been identified in the Cornwall Court area, with 14 still active, and 59 persons have recovered, and one person unfortunately has died. So the data of 17 cases identified, 14 still active, 59 recovered, and one unfortunate death in the Cornwall quarantine community of Cornwall Court in St. James.
The health minister says Raytown's been showing encouraging signs. He toured sections of the community this week. Dr. Tufton says the ministry is now in a position to recommend the lifting of the special quarantine measure in the community.
In terms of Raytown, we are very encouraged. 773 householders visited, 1,062 persons reached, 1,249 pieces of IEC material distributed, that is public education material, 112 samples taken with 0 positives and no results pending. So Raytown looks very encouraging, and thanks to the citizens for their cooperation and the team on the ground. It does point to a direction where we could lift or certainly recommend the lifting of the quarantine measures, and that's positive. So we're in a good place as it relates to Raytown.
Meanwhile, Dr. Tufton says there are now 2 active cases of COVID-19 among inmates in the local prison population.
The prison population sampling at these facilities has yielded 39 positives among inmates, with only 2 active cases currently and 394 negatives. So I think we are making progress in terms of our prison population. 54 staff members have tested positive, with only 3 active cases currently and 141 negative. So that's a quick update on our prison population based on the outbreaks that we have reported on.
Dr. Christopher Tufton, Health and Wellness Minister, he was speaking last evening during a virtual media briefing. Dr. Tufton also says there's been no change in relation to a cluster of COVID-19 cases at the Missionaries of the Poor facility. Meanwhile, Minister Tufton says as at November 3, 4 persons have died from COVID-19 in St. Thomas. There are 4 active cases of the virus in the Eastern Parish.
While St. Thomas has seen some 400 COVID-19 cases since the pandemic's first visited Jamaica's shores in March, as at November 3rd, 4 persons have died, which is very unfortunate, and we continue to express our condolences to their family members and friends. There are currently only, however, 4 active cases in the parish of St. Thomas, and I believe the population of St. Thomas is just over 100,000.
Dr. Christopher Tufton, Health and Wellness Minister. He says early and persistent intervention has helped to stem the spread of COVID-19 in St. Thomas. And that's it for the local segment. Up next is regional and international. And international news this morning. We begin with regional news. Dr. Ralph Gonsalves has been elected Prime Minister for St. Vincent and the Grenadines for a record 5th term. Dr. Gonsalves is leader of the Unity Labour Party, ULP. The party picked up 9 of the 15 seats in preliminary results. That's 1 more seat than the ULP won in the 2015 general elections. The ULP picked up the North Leeward seat, which had been held by the New Democratic Party, NDP. He defeated the NDP and their first-time leader, Dr. Godwin Friday. Dr. Gonsalves is quoted in the media as saying his party is humbled to be returned to office. Official election results are expected to be announced later this morning. Dr. Gonsalves has been Prime Minister since 2001, making him the longest-serving head of state in the Caribbean. Meanwhile, today has been declared a public holiday in St. Vincent and the Grenadines following yesterday's general elections. Hundreds of protesters have marched through the streets of Haiti's capital to demand answers after the kidnapping and killing of a young woman that has incensed the nation. Many of the protesters were dressed in school uniform. High school senior Evelyn Sincere was found in a trash heap on Sunday after relatives said they were unable to pay the large ransom demanded by her captors. Human rights groups contend the incident highlights the nation's worsening security crisis. Haiti has been rocked by street protests demanding President Jovenel Moise's ousted on allegations that he mismanaged the economy. Haiti is also grappling with growing concerns over Moise's decision to delay legislative elections and instead insist first on a constitutional referendum. International leaders, including the Trump administration and the Organization of American States, are pressuring Moise to set a date for a vote. In international news, at least 50 people have been killed by landslides in Guatemala after Storm Eta's torrential rains and high winds battered the Central American country. Guatemalan President Alejandro Giammattei said around half the deaths were in a single town where a hillside collapse buried some 20 houses under thick mud. Eta made landfall in neighboring Nicaragua as a hurricane on Tuesday. It was later downgraded to a tropical storm. Mr. Giammattei said a month's worth of rain had fallen in less than half a day during an impromptu press conference yesterday. Ongoing heavy rain has left rescue workers unable to reach one of the worst affected areas, including the town of San Cristobal Verapaz, which is home to half of the reported casualties. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has spoken with his French counterpart amid controversy over recent comments he made about free expression. Mr. Trudeau expressed Canada's solidarity with the people of France following the recent terror attacks. A teacher was beheaded in a Paris suburb after showing cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad to show off to some of his pupils. Mr. Trudeau's remarks last week about freedom of expression were criticized in both Canada and France. French President Emmanuel Macron's defense of the publication of the cartoons sparked protests in some Muslim-majority countries. There have been calls in some countries for a boycott of French goods. And that's it for regional and international. Up next is sports.